What associations do you have with the word bunker? Most often it's some kind of shelter, protection, safety. We imagine something underground, gloomy, with thick concrete walls, designed for survival in extreme conditions, whether it's war, a nuclear threat, or a natural disaster. By the way, a bunker is a very popular image in post-apocalyptic movies, where it becomes the last refuge for the surviving people. And to be serious, most often people associate a bunker with a shelter for high-ranking officials who sit underground while ordinary people die under the bombings. Hitler's bunker is an example of this. Everyone knows about it, but not everyone knows that Stalin also had his own bunker, and not just one. And the fact that later leaders of the great and mighty Soviet Union continued the glorious work of the leader of the people, preparing for inevitable nuclear war, today we will look at the largest and most important secret bunkers that were built in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics over the past 100 years. And since, of course, we don't have access to classified information, our data will be based solely on open and semi-official sources. Lastly, we'll discuss if it's fair to call Putin the bunker grandpa. As always, we'll be concise and objective. I'm Semyon, and this is the Mega Shotovaya channel. When did they start building bunkers in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics? Actually, the Soviet Union, by its very nature, was a kind of bunker state, isolated from the rest of the world. A state where the party elite lived their own lives, in their cozy, protected bunker, cut off from the everyday problems of ordinary people. But technically speaking, the construction of bunkers, like bomb shelters in general, is directly connected to the development of aviation. That is, starting from around the mid-1930s, the first prototype of a bunker was the Moscow Metro, which opened in 1935. Yes, you heard that right. The metro itself was designed as a universal bomb shelter in case of war with imperialist predators. At the same time, they started building underground command posts and shelters for top officials, including Stalin. The exact time of their construction is unknown, but in the fall of 1941, when the Germans were actively assaulting Moscow and could even see the Kremlin through binoculars, there were at least two bunkers for the leader of the people, one under the Kremlin and the other under his favorite nearby Dasha in Kuntsevo, near Moscow. That's exactly where Stalin died. The authenticity of their existence is beyond any doubt, if only because even when Moscow and the Moscow region were being heavily bombed by German aviation, the extremely paranoid Stalin never left the capital, which means he was in a protected and safe place. Later on, during the Cold War, when the threat of a nuclear strike was more real than ever, the number of bunkers for party bosses increased, and the existing ones were improved and deepened, thus creating a kind of parallel reality. In a state where all privileges were supposedly meant for workers and peasants, only high-ranking officials and the ruling elite had the chance to save themselves from a nuclear blast. As Orwell once said, everyone is equal, but some are more equal than others. By the end of the Soviet era, the capital of the vast Soviet homeland was essentially two cities, living in parallel realities, one above ground and the other beneath it. And I'm not talking about the Moscow Metro, but about what was hidden much deeper, far from people's eyes. First of all, the legendary Metro 2 should be mentioned. It's a system of secret underground metro lines that connects the Kremlin, the most important government buildings, airfields, and military facilities, as well as other bunkers, into a single network. In Moscow and outside the city. This secret metro is built beneath the regular one at a depth of at least 50 meters, and according to some sources, the depth of certain lines reaches up to 200 meters. So the Soviets were preparing for survival in a nuclear war with all seriousness. At the same time, neither the Soviet nor Putin's authorities have ever officially confirmed the existence of Metro 2, although almost all former high-ranking KGB officials who fled to the West have unequivocally confirmed its existence. In particular, the recently deceased Colonel Oleg Gordievsky, who at one time became deeply disillusioned with the ideals of communism and worked for British intelligence for a long time. Many researchers also claim that under the Kremlin itself, at a depth of 200-300 meters, there is the so-called Bunker Number 1. This is no longer the primitive bomb shelter from Stalin's time. No, we're talking about an underground palace built to ensure the survival and comfortable life of the Kremlin's elite, who today, in fact, are doing everything to make sure that a nuclear war actually happens, and in the end, the bunker would be used for its intended purpose. It's a twisted form of suicide, there's no other way to put it. But really, what else can you expect from a person who calmly says that Russians, as martyrs, will go to heaven, while the rest of the people on Earth will just die? In the early 2000s, some then relatively free newspapers reported that many Moscow bunkers were undergoing large-scale renovations and modernization. It turns out that the Stitched Dwarf was already seriously preparing for a global conflict back then and was making sure in advance that he would survive in case his precious Russia turned into a radioactive wasteland. And we can also mention the so-called Bunker 42 on Taganka, located 65 meters underground. Built in the 1950s as an alternate command post for the long-range aviation headquarters, it was designed to withstand a full-scale nuclear strike. Food and fuel supplies were stored here, 2 artesian wells with drinking water were installed, and air purification systems could ensure the crew's combat duty for several months. And that's not all. In 1962, at the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the facility operated autonomously in anticipation of a war with the United States, and up to 2,500 people were on duty here at that time. However, unlike most bunkers, this one has been declassified, and today it houses the Cold War Museum, which is open to all visitors. Also, diggers and other thrill seekers, as well as people interested in this topic, claim that another large bunker exists under the building of Moscow State University on Vorobyovy Gory, known by the code name Ramenki 43. According to them, in terms of its strength, it is quite comparable to the bunker under the Kremlin and, by various estimates, can accommodate from 10,000 to 50,000 people, supplying everything they need for months. In addition, it is repeatedly mentioned that underground bunkers are located under Putin's official residence in Novo Ogaryovo, the Federal Security Service building on Lubyanka, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs building under Izmailovsky Park, and Paveletsky railway station. Apparently, they are also connected to Metro 2. And this is just what is mentioned in the sources, but how many of them are still hidden from ordinary people is unknown. It's not surprising, though. Why should they know anything at all? The backup capital. In one of the previous videos, we discussed the heroism of the butcher Zhukov during the defense of Moscow and his methods of filling trenches with the bodies of his own soldiers. So, what would have happened if this brave knight in a T-34 tank hadn't defended the capital of our great and vast motherland? There is an answer. Stalin and all his entourage would have fled to the backup capital. So all the propaganda stories about Stalin being ready to fight in Moscow to the last bullet are refuted by quite specific historical facts. In October 1941, Stalin named Kuibyshev, now Samara, and 850 kilometers east of Moscow on the Volga River, as the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, his backup capital. In the fall of 1941, government bodies and some military administrations, foreign embassies, as well as some museum and art treasures were evacuated to this city. But few people know that for a whole year, the largest bunker of that time for high-ranking officials was built near Kuibyshev specifically for Stalin. Its depth was 37 meters, which is equal to a 12-story building. For comparison, the depth of Hitler's famous bunker in Berlin was only 16 meters, and Churchill's and Roosevelt's were even less. According to experts' calculations, the Samara bunker could easily withstand a direct hit from an aerial bomb weighing up to 2 tons thanks to a 3-meter concrete layer, a sand layer, and an additional 1-meter concrete covering. An autonomous air regeneration system, its own power station, and supplies of water and food allowed people to stay inside for up to 5 days. The bunker itself could accommodate at least 600 people, including security and maintenance staff. After the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics collapsed, Stalin's bunker, which he never visited, was declassified. Today it hosts tours, though city rumors persist. There are rumors that, in fact, there were several bunkers, and all of them were connected by secret underground passages. At this point, we can confidently say we won't know the truth anytime soon. The Urals, etc. Speaking about bunkers in modern Russia, experts in this field almost unanimously claim that Putin's main shelter is not in Moscow or even in its surroundings, but under the thickness of the Ural Mountains, more precisely, right under Mount Yamantau in the southern Urals. Locals often whisper that under hundreds of meters of rock and soil, there is not just a bunker, but an entire underground city with one or several military factories, a power plant, and huge warehouses with food supplies, ammunition, and medical equipment. Indirect data suggests the bunker under Yamantau can hold up to 60,000 people, including elites and staff, for 6 months to 2 years. And the total length of the tunnels is at least 500 kilometers, which is only slightly less than the world's largest cave, Mammoth Cave. Some sources link this bunker to the perimeter system, known in the West as the Dead Hand, an automatic nuclear retaliatory strike system. It is activated in the event of the destruction of Russia's main command centers and can be launched from Yamantau even without a direct order from Putin. That is, with a high degree of probability, there is something like a Skynet there, ready to strike America or another point in the world, even without any orders from a human, if, of course, the Russian leadership can be called human. In addition, apparently, there is also a bunker under the so-called Putin's palace in the resort city of Gelendzhik on the Black Sea. Here's the story. In 2012, the biggest Russian oligarchs pooled their money and built, for the beloved dictator's 60th birthday, an entire palace and park complex of unprecedented luxury, with a total area of 17,000 square meters. That's 3.5 times the size of the French king's residence at Versailles. Officially, the balding dwarf supposedly refused such a generous gift for the sake of appearances, since it clearly smelled like the biggest bribe in history. We know what the Kremlin tyrant's words are really worth. As for the bunker, information about it had been circulating for a long time, but people started mentioning this facility much more often after 2022, when Putin's paranoia and fear for his insignificant life became especially heightened. Where does the bunker grandpa live? Many have already forgotten. But on the night of May 3, 2023, 2 unidentified drones attacked the Moscow Kremlin, but were shot down as they approached the Senate Palace, where Putin's official office is located. Russian propaganda then began telling the world how Ukrainian Banderites treacherously and cynically tried to assassinate their beloved Führer. But those in the know immediately stated that in reality there was absolutely no threat to Putin. If only because he is hardly ever in the Kremlin, and when he is, it's just a couple of times a month for some protocol meetings and public events. So, that's the main question. Where does the bunker grandpa spend most of his time? Where does he prefer to live? And most people still lean towards the bunker in Yamantau. Some even claim that at the moment the war in Ukraine was declared on February 24, 2022, and for several weeks after, Putin stayed there without leaving, apparently afraid of a retaliatory strike from the Americans. Or when, 2 years ago, Prigozhin's horde marched on Moscow with Wagner's black banners unfurled. Putin also fled to the Urals, his own backup capital, though not for long. Based on indirect evidence, it's clear that Putin favors the super palace in Gelendzhik, which Navalny's foundation estimated a few years ago at least 100 billion rubles. But instead of the warm sea and golden sand on the beach, he prefers an underground shelter. Well, what else can I say? That's why he's called the Bunker Grandpa. And finally, about this nickname. It didn't just appear out of nowhere. It only emphasizes how disconnected the new leader of the people is from the real needs of his own citizens. And the fact that he's always trembling for his life. After all, the image of the Bunker Grandpa is a mirror that reflects the fears and expectations of Russian society, the elite, as well as the chronic paranoia of its leader. But for now, the former KGB lieutenant colonel clings to power and money with his filthy little hands at all costs. His true whereabouts, whether it's a bunker under the Urals or a modest office in the Kremlin, will always be the subject of various debates and speculation. Goodbye, everyone.